Hello, and welcome to another episode from Season 6 of The Horrific Podcast. We're two friends who live in different places but share a passion for scary movies. Each week we pick a different horror movie and dissect it to figure out what it was trying to accomplish, how well it did, and maybe even some larger truths about why people watch horror movies in the first place. This season we're changing things up. We're devoting a whole season to reviewing Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time. In each episode, we'll break down a different movie, talk about how scary it really was, and then update our rankings to prove how much smarter we are than the other people on the internet. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you enjoy the conversation. So as we continue our journey through Esquire's list of the 50 scariest movies of all time, we have finally found ourselves at The Lords of Salem from 2012.
This is Esquire's list of scariest movies of all time, not ours.
That is very true.
I would just like that to be out there.
Yeah, I feel like we have not had a lot of thrills and chills on the list thus far. But we did start at number 50, and we're working our way down. So,
and it's getting us to watch, right? And it's getting us to watch some movies that we, probably wouldn't have right away. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. Yeah,
and I actually wasn't familiar with this one at all. Like, I know a lot of other Rob Zombie movies, but I just really had no exposure to this one.
Yeah, it was kind of the same for me. Like, I saw it. It had like a cool picture on the image for the movie.
Yeah.
Which is like Sherry Moon Zombies, like in the white and black makeup. Mm-hmm. But that was basically like the stint of what I knew of this movie.
Yeah. Well, and I know that you're a big fan of Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, the Devil's Rejects, yeah.
Have you seen many of his other movies?
Oh, yeah, okay. For sure. Like, this one, it goes from, the Devil's Rejects being, one of my all-time favorite movies. Mm-hmm. And, I've seen, House of a Thousand Corpses, just, all these, mm-hmm. His Halloweens, and it makes sense that this is probably the last one that I've seen, and the reason why.
Ah, gotcha. Yeah, well, let me introduce it, and then we will get into the details.
Yeah.
In 2012, Rob Zombie released his project, The Lords of Salem. One of the production companies that worked on the project with him was Blumhouse Productions, which we've discussed a lot in previous episodes. The Lords of Salem follows a woman named Heidi who is a radio DJ in modern-day Salem, Massachusetts. When a strange record is delivered to her station, a series of strange events begin to occur that lead to the uncovering of dark secrets about Salem's past. The Lords of Salem was made on a budget of about $1.5 million and brought in about the same amount at the box office. It can currently be purchased on Amazon Prime Video or rented through iTunes.
Or watched free on Pulse TV, Pluto TV.
Oh. So
Apple TV app.
Nice. I also somehow had just completely overlooked that on the Esquire list, underneath mm-hmm. every movie, they have links to where you can stream it.
I literally just noticed that.
That's funny. I did too. But yeah, because I noticed that on Amazon Prime, you could only buy it. And I was like, surely someplace will have this for rent. And then I looked at it and saw that they had a link to iTunes. And I was like, oh, yeah, that's a thing. And yeah.
Oh, so did you rent it or did you buy it?
Yeah, I just rented it.
Okay, through iTunes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a couple facts about this movie. Not a lot.
Okay.
I'm keeping them short nowadays. Due to the controversial script, the production was not allowed to shoot at certain locations. Most notably, no church would allow them to film inside. Additionally, they weren't allowed to shoot at a wax museum in Salem because the script was not historically accurate, like Bewitched. So that came from Rob Zombie during the commentary of the movie.
Nice.
So, from what I was reading, a couple, they shot a few scenes in Salem, but most of it was actually in California. So, another fact, despite what some people think, the film didn't have any digital effects. Everything was they said practical. Mm-hmm. I think they said accomplished practically on the set. which like one thing specifically that they bring up when that happens are some rats that come down a hallway, which for me, like, it looked fake. And I went back and watched it, and it was sure enough, from Rob Zombie himself, he says that everything was done without CGI.
Nice.
So the last thing, the Coven prologue sequences were shot at Sable Ranch in Santa Clara, California, where Rob Zombie also shot The Devil's Rejects and his Grindhouse trailer, Werewolf Women of the SS. It was an extremely cold day, but none of the disrobed actresses complained. Zombie knew it was time to stop filming when Meg Foster could no longer pronounce the word Satan. So that was my short facts about the movie. But I also find that last one funny because it was like California cold.
Yeah.
Is probably not,
not what we would think of as cold.
Yeah. Not like Oklahoma in April,
right.
Like when it randomly gets, to negative 20 degrees.
So, I've got, this movie got me thinking about a thing that probably is going to be overanalyzed here in the next couple minutes, but I want you to embark on this journey with me.
Okay.
So something we talk a lot about is like types of horror movies. So there's like slasher and creature and haunting, psychological, supernatural, like all that. But lately I've been noticing this other pattern that I've never really thought of before. And maybe it's just because of some of the movies that we've watched recently. But it's this storyline that's like the opposite of the underdog. Or it's like maybe like a hero for evil. So like if you think about like Harry Potter or the good Star Wars movies, you have this kid who's in bad circumstances and seems like super ordinary.
Right.
And then you find out over time that there's really like a lot more to that kid's story, and that even though he doesn't know about it, he's part of this like bigger world and destined to play this role in some fight against evil. And he's like the chosen special person who can save everyone, and the story is following like his journey of finding that out and like embracing who he's really supposed to be. And that seems like a really common like adventure story arc.
Right.
But in horror, I've been noticing that like kind of the opposite of that is a thing. Like you have a main character who finds out that they're part of some sort of ancient evil or this plan of, the devil or some malevolent force, and they've been either chosen or preordained or whatever to be like the tool by which that ancient evil finally comes back, or that evil presence is able to again manifest itself in the physical world. Yeah. And then the story is you watching that happen. So ones that we've seen recently that are definitely like falling into that are Hereditary, Suspiria, Midsummer, and then this movie for sure.
Yeah, that's a crazy way. I wouldn't have thought, just because it seems so natural. Yeah.
But in watching those movies, I never felt like, oh yeah, this is a pattern. This is a thing I've seen before a lot in horror. But now thinking about it, I do feel like it's kind of but I don't know what you would call that genre. I was going to say like witch horror, but it's not always witches.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. That's a good question that we should, if any of the listeners have any idea, they should let us know.
Yeah. And I'm sure there are tons of other examples of it, but it's just kind of interesting. And I also think it's an interesting twist on what is like a very known kind of story arc for normal movies.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's pretty interesting that this one single idea can be used so much between horror and not horror. Basically, it's like you said, Harry Potter and Star Wars, but also like Rocky and Rambo. Like for us not nerds, those are the movies I think is kind of similar. Yeah, I think with this one though, now I understood this movie. So like I got this movie because I knew it was a Rob Zombie movie. I've seen like House of a Thousand Corpses. Neither one kind of made sense to me, and so that's why I knew it was kind of like a Rob zombie movie. But at the same time, for me, I thought it was like almost like a psychedelic horror movie.
Oh yeah.
So like kind of picked up like those kind of vibes, and I got that from my old buddy John when we watched House of a Thousand Corpses. And like it reminded me of House of a Thousand Corpses in certain situations, not entirely.
Yep.
Not not the whole film. This one actually makes more sense than that movie. But yeah, just that's why I kind of picked up. So that's why some of the flashbacks and just
like the dreams and hallucinations and stuff.
Yeah, just all that. Just it kind of worked together.
Yeah. So I would like to come back to that. I have actually some stuff in my notes a little bit later. So we're going to do that thing that we always do and say we'll talk about it more later.
Yeah, my favorite. I'm good at that.
That's a theme of the podcast. But yeah, so backing up just a little bit, this was probably the first one on the list that to me felt like a real, full, unapologetic horror movie.
Yeah.
Like there was no goofy comedy, no political statements. It was just like a real balls to the wall horror. Yep. And I found that kind of refreshing because it's been a while. And definitely on this list, I feel like everything was like, well, it's a horror movie, but...
Right.
Whereas this one, it's like, there is no but. That's what it is.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think we also should appreciate it, too, for, like, looking at the rest of the list or some of the movies on the list that we have to watch. But, yeah, it was definitely a horror movie, which came from Rob Zombie, so that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that he definitely has a style, and in some cases it works well, in some cases it doesn't. But overall, I thought the directing of this one was actually really good. I mean, I thought it did some cool things. It had a lot of good, like, attention-grabbing scene transitions, and just a lot of the setup of the shots and stuff I thought was good. And with you talking about the using all practical effects, that's a lot more effort than I had originally thought.
Yeah.
So the directing was good. The acting was a little questionable sometimes, though.
Yeah, I actually wrote down that this movie is like hardcore porn acting with softcore porn storyline.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the directing goes, this is gonna sound like tedious. I don't care because it kind of bothered me. Like the film was almost too dark, like lighting wise.
Yeah, it was hard to see stuff a lot.
Yeah, and it was just like, oh my god, like my eyes felt worn out by the end of the movie. Like it seemed like everything was at night for the most part, or inside with bad lighting, and just all that. Now that's that kind of bothered me, but that's also like what you kind of get with some Rob Zombie movies.
Oh yeah,
not like his mainstream, but like Devil's Rejects is the same. I mean, Sherry Moon Zombie, like the main character is his wife, is Rob Zombie's wife, and it was pretty rough.
Yeah,
but I don't know if it was done like on purpose. Like I could see like something like that being done on purpose because of like mimicking old 70s horror movies or psychedelic horror movies, but it's like.
Well, and I think, too, that he probably is getting people to work with him that are people that he feels like share his artistic vision. Yeah. Not people that he's hiring just because of their acting skill. Like, he's not out there hiring Kristen Bell to play the lead in this.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I know that a lot of them use the same... he had some of the same characters in this as the Devil's Rejects, so... Yeah. But... it did get pretty rough there for quite a while. Like just some of the dialogue going back and forth, where it's like when they're like saying something sarcastic back to someone, but they say it with the same monotone, right? And it was just like, oh man, I can't get behind that. That's yeah.
It's always so like we talk about most of the movies we watch. The acting doesn't have to be good. It just needs to not be so bad that it's distracting. And I felt like this one got into that distracting a few times. But the writing stood out to me a lot on this one. And part of it was that it was just a lot more complex than a lot of the other movies we've watched recently. Like, I really liked that there were multiple storylines. Because you had the Salem witch trial era, then you had the author's investigation, and then you had Heidi's experiences all going on kind of at the same time.
Right.
And the way that they all kind of progressed in parallel and then converged at the end. You know, a lot of the other movies we've watched recently are a lot more linear, and it's just one thing after another. And I didn't necessarily think this one was perfect. Like, I think the grand reveal about Heidi being Hawthorne's descendant could have been a lot more dramatic, because it was just so obvious by the time it happened. But it was kind of nice to have a little bit more depth in the story and a little bit more going on and things happening in different areas after some of the movies like M and Blood and Black Lace, where it just felt like, and then they did this, and then they did this the whole time. So,
well, so with the storyline, so Heidi is his descendant, but yes. he was the reverend that burned the witches, right?
Yes.
And so, like, was the whole idea that the witches were getting back at her because of it? Because it seemed like...
So I believe that as the main witch was being burned, the one that they had, like, in that chair,
yeah, that
she cursed Hawthorne, and part of that curse was that one of his descendants would be that chosen one, you know, or whatever, that lets the devil come back into the world at the same level of power that he had before. So that was kind of the way that I interpreted it, in that was a purposeful thing, that they wanted him to die, you know, like knowing that it was one of his descendants that would undo all of his work.
Gotcha.
So
makes so much more sense now.
But yeah, that is you know, some speculation on my part and putting pieces together. I definitely agree that the story was not super straightforward. But
yeah.
But also, I really liked the way that music was kind of worked in throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, I can't remember last time I heard Velvet Underground in a movie soundtrack, and I loved that. But he also just worked music a lot into the actual plot. I mean, obviously, Rob Zombie is a musician, and that's like a big part of his life. But, you know, the characters worked at a radio station, and then they were interviewing the guy from the metal band who was talking about the sheep and goats thing that's kind of setting the scene for just frames of reference for, like, the background philosophy of the movie.
Yeah.
Like satanic lore, I guess. And the way that they introduced that information was by them talking to a musician. And then, like, there was that evil record that played the song that started all of the weird events, you know, the witches coming back into power. And then how there were, like, those notes that were in the old journal that was like that song that was sort of exerting power over the women of Salem. And I thought it was really interesting that he, as a musician, found all of those ways to work music and, like, the power of music into the story in a way that didn't really feel like forced. It was, like, actually part of the plot.
Yeah, and so in addition to composing the score of the film, John Five, which is a guitarist in Rob Zombie's band, he actually appears as a character, Halvard the Guardian, which is a member of the black metal band Leviathan, the Fleeing Serpent, and as a demonic doctor. But I thought that I definitely agree with, like, after I read that, thinking of, like, how he played music and sound, like how it fit into it, it definitely makes sense that a musician made a film.
Yeah.
Like, if we made a movie, it would, like, we would probably have arguments nonstop just about, like, the soundtrack alone.
yeah, for sure.
You know, just because that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a thing that would be, like, very important and at the forefront of the design of the thing. So, yeah. Now, I have to say, I kind of liked. It wasn't great acting, but I kind of liked the three witches, like the three older witches. Yeah, like the landlady and her two friends. Yeah. Like, because, like, they played the character how they were supposed to. Like, they did. They're not supposed to be a likable character. Like, they annoyed the hell out of you, and then you know, after they killed the writer, whatever his name was, after they killed him, it was like you really didn't like them, but they played it extremely, extremely well. Yeah, I thought that they were really good, and I thought that you nailed it exactly, in that they played the roles exactly the way they were supposed to be. So yeah. And I think two of those were actually sisters. Oh, really? Yeah, I'm pretty sure, and apparently, like, they could not get along on set at all, like, at all. But anyway. Yeah. So I guess they were, descendants of like some of the witches that had been burned, or at least were like a new manifestation of them or something. And they sort of ushered in the whole, I guess, transition into a lot more of like the weird stuff that was going on. Mm-hmm. And I felt like visually the way that was pulled off was kind of cool a lot of times, but it was like the setup for the scenes were really good, but some of the effects were weird. So like one example I wrote down is when Heidi goes into her apartment, and then in the hallway the light closest to apartment 5 starts swinging, and then she goes in and to feed the dog, and she turns on the light in the kitchen, and one of those like burnt witches is standing there on the counter looking mm-hmm. down at her. And that one, and then the one like where she walked by it and it was in the bathroom but she didn't notice earlier.
Yeah.
They just look super fake. Like they look like statues, not like people in costume.
Yep.
And that was weird, like distractingly weird. And I just assumed it was CG and that's why it was so off, but I guess it wasn't. So I was kind of confused by that.
Yeah, it was definitely like, and another like was when the priest showed up and his face was like all black.
Yeah.
And it was like, it just looked kind of like a bad mask. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. Now, it was definitely like if there was something creepy that stood out in this movie, for me, it was those scenes specifically. Like, mm-hmm. I mean, anytime you turn on a light and there's someone in the background, that's pretty creepy. Some movies have based their whole film off of that.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, it was definitely like I definitely appreciate the idea of trying to do it without CGI, but maybe sometimes you should.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes it worked really well, like with the doctors that had like the black kind of blank faces.
Yeah.
I thought those looked cool. But what was up with that fat baby monster thing?
Oh, I have no idea.
That's the part that I can't fit into anything about any of the story anywhere.
Where like the arms were super long and like stretched out, and she held on to them.
Yeah, and it just looked awkward. Like it didn't look scary. It just looked kind of gross.
Yeah, those were the scenes that reminded me of House of a Thousand Corpses.
Yeah. And so I guess kind of getting back to that, and you talking about it being like almost like psychedelic horror. Mm-hmm. So that's actually one of the things I wanted to ask you about, because pretty early on, she starts having weird experiences, but then like a lot of times she either wakes up from it and it was obviously a dream, or like suddenly she's in another location and you're not sure if it was real or not. And you get that feeling very early on that when weird stuff starts going down, it's probably not real. So it's like, you know that the movie's going to be weird and that you're going to be put into all of these like strange scenarios, but they're not necessarily going to end up being dangerous. They're just going to kind of converge back. And like I liked that you kind of never knew what to trust. Like it was very disorienting and hard to come up with any type of explanation, because you didn't know what was evidence of the larger story and what was just like a nightmare. Mm-hmm. But I didn't like that it kind of took away from the urgency of it when every time you know that it's probably not real.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I think I think it works in some cases where it's like, if it's really going off the rails and it's really not making sense, like early on, like to do that once or twice, but it seemed like it just kind of kept happening throughout the movie, which is when it kind of gets like, oh, okay. You know, like I definitely get trying to fool the viewer and to make them not necessarily understand, or like to keep them on their toes. But at this case, kind of like you said, like if it I feel like if it happens so many times, you drop your guard, but also it just stays down. Like you know, it just doesn't affect you as much, like when something crazy's happening, because you're like, well, this could be a dream. That might be why she's holding the weird hands of a baby monster. I don't know, like yeah, and there was, after a while it just kind of felt like, well, this is just going for shock value. Like this probably isn't contributing anything to the story, and you know, and I did feel, I'm sure this will surprise no one, but I did feel like this movie was a little bit longer than it needed to be. That's our tagline for both of us. Yeah, I definitely agree. I think it did a few things for like shock factor that, like, it didn't like offend me, but it was just like, like, I don't get it. Like, when Sherry Moon Zombie's sitting at the end with the priests who are, masturbating.
Yeah.
He's like, I don't understand that.
Yeah.
But,
well, even when she, like, wanders into that old church and the priest was getting all weird with her and stuff, it was like, as soon as that happened, it's like, okay, obviously this is just another one of the freakouts, and like, this is just, anyway. But But yeah, so the whole thing then kind of culminates with the ending where she kind of accepts that she's a descendant of the witches and embraces it, or of Hawthorne, and embraces it and goes to the concert where they're playing the Lords of Salem song, and things escalate, and then it just ends kind of with her standing on a pile of corpses, and it's over. And I mean, it was fine, I guess, as a way of concluding the story, but it left me with the same question that I've had at the end of all the movies I mentioned earlier, like Midsommar and Hereditary, where it's like there's this huge build-up, and now this person has finally become evil incarnate or whatever, but now what? Like it's this, the whole movie is like this huge build-up to them like being that thing, and then they become that thing, and then it's like done. But
yeah. Plays the scene at the very end with like the TV announcer announcing, like, what was it, like 23 women dead, one person missing. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was kind of trying to set up for a sequel or something. But I thought. Then again, like, sometimes at the end of movies, I'm just kind of relieved.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's because like you're trying to, like, when we watch movies for podcasts, you can't watch them like a normal movie. Like, you're trying to like analyze it, I guess, in a way. Even if like that's not what we're wanting to do, it still happens because it's like I got to try to think of something to say when we do the. But anyway, so it's like at the end of the movie, like the priests are doing their thing and it announces that they're gone. And it's just like, okay, cool, like it's done.
Yeah.
On to the next one, kind of thing. Like, it didn't necessarily impress me much, but there were definitely things about the film that I think I liked, that I think Rob does. One thing I really like with horror movies, Stephen King kind of does this, but I like the idea, or any movie, but I like the idea of like creating your own world. And so, like, technically Rob Zombie did this thing in Salem, Massachusetts, but kind of made Salem like what he thought Salem would be if the witch trials or the witches were real and it actually happened. So, like, I thought that was cool. That's why I liked the movie. That being said, I probably wouldn't watch it again unless we did like a take on it again one day. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and so for me, as far as like on the list, I think I would rate this one as like scarier than most of the ones that we've watched on the list so far. And I would probably put it with some of the other movies that I felt like it was an actual horror movie. It was trying to be a horror movie, but there were just some things about the way it was pulled off that made it not as good as it could have been. So I'd put it with like kind of Black Christmas and Goodnight Mommy and Cabin Fever, where it's like these movies all had some good ideas and did some cool things, but there were also ways about how they were made that were like a little bit distracting or off-putting.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. I think it was like creepy, more scary than Cabin Fever, but it also just made me sit there and want to watch The Witch, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but it just made me want to watch The Witch. Yeah, like that's how I felt about the movie. It's like, okay, if I want to watch something about witches, I want to see something put together really well. Yeah,
well, and I felt like The Witch too kind of had that same type of storyline where you had that older daughter, and the whole thing is like, oh, you've got to avoid, we've got to move away to stay away from, the evils of the world, and then eventually she just like embraces the evil. It kind of has a little bit of a similar feel.
Yeah, so. Exactly. Which maybe this movie came out, maybe The Witch came out because of this movie.
Yeah. If so, then thank you, Rob Zombie.
Yeah. Thank you, Robert Zomber.
And that's it for today's episode. If you've listened this far, then thank you, and we hope you've enjoyed it. We're always looking for new ideas, so if you have any questions, comments, or movie suggestions, please send us an email at thehorrificpod@gmail.com, or feel free to comment on or message our Facebook page. Just search for The Horrific Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I was looking. Anyway, so I'm trying to do this new thing with my facts where even though I'm reading them, it doesn't sound like I'm reading them.
Okay.
And so I'm trying to also be faster at them, because after editing the last two podcasts, I see how long my sequences and like compared to like reading, what the movie is.
Sure.
And I'm like, if I can cut that down, then we could probably not have extremely long podcasts. But that way, I decided just to explain it to everyone, just so I can make up that time that I was going to miss.
Oh, good, yeah.
I'm going to do that every week.
Yeah, I like it. The more we talk, the more we have to edit, and Lord knows that's the most fun part of this.